Okay, so welcome to the official opening of this intermediate meeting devoted to our second training axis of the network's community of tacit knowledge. Also on behalf of Gennaro, who had some personal issues, familiar, and cannot stay with us for the whole time of the meeting, I really wanted to thank Angelo and Giancarlo for their collaboration in the organization of the meeting, and Claudia and also Filippo for helping, Francesca Gotti for following all the technical issues also related to the organization of the meeting. This will be our second public lecture. We had our first lecture by Simona Pierini a few weeks ago that officially inaugurated this series of talks devoted to Milanese architectural culture of the 50s. As you know, one of the main aim of this training axis is to try to understand how to investigate and what does probing for tacit knowledge can which meaning this idea of probing can assume. And we decided for the Milan meeting to focus on a particular community of practice, to a particular context, using Milanese architectural cultures, but also Milanese post-war built environment as a real laboratory ground to try to investigate the establishment of a series of codes, conventions, and several cultural networks that are observed in the way of communicating knowledge inside, within and outside the community of practice. I found very interesting the connection between the two lectures. Simona Pierini, in her lecture a few weeks ago that was titled Urban Domesticities, tried to look at the interiors of Milanese houses as a set, as a ground to investigate the establishment of special relations, interrelation and dialogues between the architects and the clients, showing a very precise modus operandi and how a set of codes were established and diffused through these interiors. Together today with Angela and Giancarlo, and then Claudia will introduce properly, but you already know them because they are one of the architectural office involved in our network as a non-academic partner, so all of you already know them. They will continue in this investigation of Milanese architectural cultures of the 50s, focusing on certain residential buildings, a built environment really as a laboratory of investigation to understand the establishment within certain cultural networks of codes and practice. So their talk today will for us will provide the theoretical framework and the interpretative categories that will be used also on Wednesday on the occasion of the workshop that you will have with Angelo and Giancarlo, coordinated and guided by Onsite Studio. So I will not waste the time with my presentation. I think, Claudia, you can introduce them and the office, and so we can start then with the talk.
Yes, thank you, Gaia, and thank you very much, Angela and Giancarlo, of course. So I will say just few words before leaving you the word. So let's say that Onsite Studio is an architecture practice founded in Milan by Giancarlo Lunati and Giancarlo Floridi. As stated in their bio, the projects of the studio are informed by a sensitive approach to physical consistency according to the tone of context and by the potential of materials and construction as a matter of experience and atmosphere of places. Since its foundation, Onsite Studio aims at combining an experimental dimension together with a professional one, finding answers to complex problems through an accurate control of design process and a continuous coordination with different consultants. Among the most relevant projects and realizations of the office, they are the school complex at Cascina Merlata in 2016, the Pirelli Learning Center also in 2016, the Duca d'Aosta Hotel in Milan in 2015, and the Expo Service So Onsite Studio's work has been published in Italian international books and magazine like Casabella, Domus, Abitare, Le Moniteur, etc., and displayed in several exhibitions, like among others, the Venice Architecture Biennale in 2012, 14, and 16. So I will give the floor to Angelo and Giancarlo now for their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gaia. Thank you, Claudia, for the introduction. Good evening to everyone. I hope that you hear well my voice. And we are very happy tonight to make this introduction, which is something that we would like to articulate in two different moments. I will share my screen, probably. Okay, the first moment will be an introduction by myself about titled Decoding Post-War Milanese Architecture. And it's I will try to make a general figure, a general framework of the social and the cultural framework in which the transformation of the city of Milan took place in the post-war period, and in which the richness of the architecture that we've been seeing with Simona some days ago, and we will be seeing later with the presentation of Giancarlo of the workshop, and during the workshop in a couple of days, to in a way locate this building and this transformation within a general framework. And hopefully this will help us to understand better some contents and some way these codes were absorbed into this community of architects, and how this can be, let's say, probed and verified today as contemporary architects and researchers. I will try to do that, focusing on four specific points that to me are quite relevant in the understanding of all this. Also referring to the research that I've been doing at the ETH some years ago under the supervision of Adam Caruso, Laurent Stalder, and Marco Biraghi, that you probably have a piece in your bibliography. So let's start with a quick. It will be quite dense. So excuse for the density of all this subject, but I think it's work, and hopefully will help us in the continuation of the workshop. As you may, the 2 decades after the World War II in Italy were a moment of unprecedented prosperity, we would say, and Milan was probably the heart of this prosperity. I think that one of the most remarkable aspects of this prosperity was the spontaneous character of this prosperity, which was a response to the free play of the market forces. So the economic model of this prosperity was centered on individual and family choices, was, of course, related to public investment, but most of all was centered on individual and family choices. And I think that this spontaneous character, the same qualities of spontaneity and private initiative that defines this economic growth on a national level, could be seen as underpinning the transformation of Milan in the post-war years. A redevelopment of both the center of the city, we here see in this image, one of the main architectural spot of this very dense city center, and both the periphery. And this, let's say, transformation was not overarched by a master plan of a general vision, but was achieved by a network of medium-sized and small intervention organized independently by the more active social classes, so that the new fabric took shape in a seemingly undirected way. So this kind of spontaneity is something that we can also see in the transformation in the city, and I think that this image conveys very well this idea of a kind of undirected organic way of transformation of the city. So with the end of the war, the city regained its civic vitality in the new democratic context. We know that the city was liberated from the rigid social codes of fascism. And in this way, the post-war city was notable both for its social mobility and its varied demographics, a pluralist mosaic given the strong presence of professional, tradesmen, clerks, and technicians. And I think that this graphic work by Saul Steinberg very well provides this idea of a very vital social situation. You see this crowded image of the Galleria in Milan. The Milanese industrial bourgeoisie once more claim a central role in the reconstruction of the financial and commercial infrastructure of the city and the country, reinforcing its local power independently of national political developments. The bourgeoisie became instrumental in Milan's economic and social renewal. So in this case, the governance of the city, both the governance of the city and the transformation of the industrial power of the city was largely determined by private entrepreneurial interests. Most of them were local. So this renewal was something that was emerging from the local society, and nothing let's say grafted from the outside or from Rome or from other, let's say, energies that were not inside the city. An understanding of Milan's social and economic milieu in this period provides an insight of the emerging environmental character that we can see also as contemporary actors in the city. Indeed, the most distinctive feature of post-war Milan is the variety and range of its economic fabric. Although it was home to some of the large industrial and financial groups in the country, it never took on the configuration of a company town, like, for example, Turin or other city in Europe, nor it was dominated by a single enterprise. Instead, it was its multiple economic center of power ensured that it remained open to individual business initiatives. And unlike other cities where the presence of industry gave rise to a distinct working class culture, it could be said that for some extent Milan rejected by a majority rigorous self-identification in terms of class. So in a way, the city can be considered bourgeois in the sense that it identified with that bourgeois spirit that assigns recognition also in public life to values of individual merit and to the objective of concreteness. This social structure laid the foundation for the rise of a mentality that was not ideological, but was much more contractual. And I think this is also a quite interesting point. The anti-ideological approach to the local bourgeoisie was something that incredibly was reflected in the construction and transformation of the city in the post-war period. So the main values of the Milanese post-war culture and society, we could say, were cosmopolitanism, so a kind of strong interest towards what was happening outside Europe, in the US, especially pragmatism, scientific, technical rationality, work ethic, tolerance of diversity. And this is, to me, quite important because all this anti-ideological, pragmatic attitude toward works and to work, the achievement of results, it's something that is embedded in the culture of architects that were transforming and shaping the city in these years. Another key point is the the continuity with previously existing condition. Central to the Milanese bourgeois ethos is the pursuit of a modernity that asserts a continuity with previously existing condition, almost as if modernization has necessarily to be accompanied by a recuperation of the past. Rather than a form of conservatism, this could be interpreted as an idea of progress that resists revolutionary hypotheses. And this is another key points, the anti-revolutionary approach to modernity connected to the bourgeois ethos was something that will be informing the approach of architects toward the transformation of the city. The Milanese character, I'm quoting Lorenzo Ornaghi, an economist, has never liked adventurous flights towards the new, the unilateral intensification of conflicts, the illusion of revolutionary palingenesis. The social community of Milan reflects its own leaning towards the patient construction of tomorrow, its own will to hold on the best of existing tradition. So this idea that the progress and a continuous progress can be achieved towards the everyday effort without any kind of revolutionary stance. It's the prominently bourgeois character of the city that guarantees the strong continuity of its urban identity, as well as a certain resistance to radical change, as the bourgeoisie, of course, is naturally averse to risking the loss. This ambition to be modern without being revolutionary, in addition to being part of the social makeup of Milan, I think offers a meaningful interpretation of the character of the city of Milan that emerged from the post-war reconstruction, but also offers a meaningful understanding of the absorbing, I would say, of the existing codes from the new architects towards in relation to what was existing before. So the ambition to be modern without being revolutionary. And I think that all these characters that are embedded in the bourgeois ethos can be really good reference to understand the approaches that we, for example, we will see in the work of Luigi Cacciadominioni and the duo Asnagevender in our workshop. Another key point that it's quite crucial to understand, it's the kind of culture in which the architectural culture and the architects were relating to, were engaging to. It's a culture that has particular features that was linked to also in this case to an idea of an anti-dogmatic idea of culture and an anti-political idea of culture. The effort to revive the economy of the city were matched by an equally strong desire shared by the intellectual to restore a community ravaged by the physical and moral destruction of the war. This cultural rebirth entailed a surprising aptitude for thinking about the new, a collective and ready embrace of change, and for that I've titled A New Culture of the New, meaning the idea of thinking about the new in a different way in relation to what was happening before. First given voice by the intellectual avant-gardes, the drive for renewal would be sustained and continuously nurtured in the years that followed by a sizable intellectual class spanning also of architects, spanning different disciplines, and by a system of higher education, for example, universities, that were, I mean, not isolated from society, but were active part of the society. While the commitment to cultural renewal took many forms during the post-war years, perhaps its two most significant manifestation, condensing the hopes and the tension of an entire generation, were a magazine and a cultural association. The magazine was the Il Politecnico, that was set up just after the war by Elio Vittorino, the man you see here on the right side, that significantly took its name and its goals also from the influential magazine founded by Carlo Cattaneo in the mid-19th century, which offered a monthly repertoire of studies applied to prosperity and culture and social culture. Vittorini was also one of the founder of the Casa della Cultura, which was the other place of the construction of this new culture. And the new culture, if you can see here on the left side of the first editorial of the magazine, Una Nuova Cultura was, yes, the title of this first piece of Vittorini, in which he was intertwining social and political realities, trying to acknowledging that the disengagement from culture had contributed to the rise of fascism. So it was a way to, in a way, state a new way to make culture, and with some characters that we'll try to explain. And the other side, Casa della Cultura, that was founded by Vittorini and by a philosopher, Antonio Banfi, which is the man that you see here on in the glass with the glasses, who was a philosopher, and in this photograph is together with a group of architects. We can recognize Ernesto Rogers, Joe Ponti, and other architects on the left side. And it was Casa della Cultura was founded by him and by another group of intellectuals and publishers like Alberto Mondadori or Giulio Einaudi, the banker Raffaele Mattioli, and also Ernesto Rogers. And Vittorino and Banfi were the two intellectual pivots of the post-liberation Milan, and there was a clear organizational and conceptual interaction between the Politecnico and the Casa della Cultura, as well as the common thread of a modern humanism. In both cases, in both instances, the horizon of research was wide open and cosmopolitan. Both the review and Casa della Cultura were trying to invite and publish different kind of writers like Jean-Paul Sartre, Marxist philosophers, Paul Eluard. So there was a distinctive, what was distinctive about this situation was the reconciling of dualities between two different kind of cultures. And this is also quite interesting in relation to the practice of architects in this period, the humanist intellectual and the technical scientific. Rather than remaining in an ivory tower, Il Politecnico placed the words of technology and production at the center of its reflection. And another point which is quite interesting, despite the differences of political affiliation, Milan's intellectual and cultural scene was defined by a shared identity. The ideological position between communists and anti-communists, which would soon have a huge impact at the national level, was not yet entrenched in Milanese culture sphere. So this smoothing of political differences to achieve a unified character could be seen as mirroring the unprecedented unity of the character of the post-war city, achieved despite differences in the architectural language it applied. So this idea of looking at culture in a very apolitical and anti-dogmatic way is something that is very interesting also from an architecture point of view. Another key aspect of the post-war Milan was the force of attraction that drew the worlds of culture and finance. A number of men straddled the sphere of business, politics, and intellectual inquiry. For example, Raffaele Mattioli, who I already quoted, was the president of the Banca Commerciale Italiana, was promoting many cultural initiatives, and it was Mattioli too who helped to acquire Michelangelo Pietà Rondanini for the city of Milan, which you see here in this photograph. Simone already reminds you that, as was for the case before the war, publishing was an important driver for the renewal of the city, with many magazines like Domus, Casabella, Cantieri Stile, and of the various disciplines that plays an important role. We could say that architecture was the best expressed the advanced European outlook of those years. Ponti in particular insisted also on the crucial role of Milan and Lombardy in the development of industrial design. And now alongside architects and industrial designers, graphic designers, as you can see here, also played a central role connecting the fields of culture and industrial production. So, like, for example, the works of Max Huber or Albert Steiner that you see here. Again, these different profession architects, designers, and graphic artists did not operate within narrowly defined boundaries. Instead, in this interdisciplinary exchange was the order of the day. Rather than being removed from the action, the city's intellectual elite was right at the heart of the process of constructing a new cultural identity. Rather than being a passive witness of change, it was itself the engine of change. The third focus I will deal is dealing with the specific urban fabric of the city and the specific history of some of its monuments. The bombed historic center, as you can see here, became a kind of, like Gaia was reminding, a laboratory for the new architecture. The irregular nature of destruction, which followed the wake of the demolition in the 30s, that maybe later I will show you quickly, gave post-war Milanese architects the opportunity to conceive a new idea of grafting onto the existing city and onto the compact historic center of Milan that you see here in this image, which conveys the idea of a place, of a very dense city, which in a way can be considered an anti-monumental city because you cannot find any kind of monumental system of public space nor monumental natural feature. So as already highlighted by Giovanni Muzio and later also by Aldo Rossi, Milan is an anti-monumental city. And this anti-monumentality has also a lot to do with the bourgeois ethos that I was trying to explain before. This survey that was held in 1946, of course, provides a picture of the damage that occurred in the air raids, along with more than thousands of residential buildings and all the monuments that were destroyed. But I think this survey is also interesting because the extensive field work that was carried out not by municipal surveyors, like maybe also Simona was telling, but the very architects that will be soon operating within the city. So you can see here, among others, Gardella, Albini, Belgioioso, Ernesto, Rogers, Vitolatis, and Giulio Minoletti, among the one that were making this survey. And this major exercise in information gathering, therefore, had the same core character that would define the reconstruction of the city in the years to come. As in many other cities that were bombed, reconstruction, of course, was a pressing issue, but in contrast to most other European cities badly damaged by the war, in Milan, the process took place outside the framework of a general plan. Also, in this case, I was telling you, there was not a general vision on how to restore, how to reset or reform the city. The bombed city, with not purposely, but with a generosity intrinsic to its constitutional logic, became an environmental laboratory, providing an extraordinary series of opportunities where the specific character of the site, whether a corner of an urban grid, a courtyard to be completed, or a secret garden, was the starting point for experimenting with an architecture that would establish a new relationship both with its immediate surrounding and the historic city as a whole. Also in this case, rather than thinking of large-scale project imposed on the body of the city, as happened, for example, in the 30s, when Milan had its competition for the new master plan, the focus was now on discrete intervention in field projects, mostly for middle-class residences or for workspaces or for apartments to rent, like for example, this very famous one, which was the second piece that Asnago built around the block close in the south part of the center of Milan, south of the cathedral, which will be seen in a while. But we should also highlight that the same kind of resistance for tabula rasa intervention occurred during the great transformation of the city during the fascist regime. In those years, in the 20s, the city was, in the 30s, I would say, but in the 26, there was 27, there was the competition. The city in the 30s was Haussmannized, let's say. It was carved by a very dense system of new streets foreseen by the Portaluppi plan, who was the winner of the competition, that was translated in the Albertini plan some years later. In this case, here you see the project by Muzio and colleagues, Forma Urbis Mediolani, which is a much more sophisticated attempt to make this new level of streets, avoiding all the historical monuments and the historical presence in the city. But despite, or as you can see here, the single intervention that the bourgeoisie made in the 30s already talks about a pursuit of continuity, of attunement, and physical continuity, what was before. So this idea of drafting into the old city was something that was not invented by the post-war architect, but was something that was in the genetics of the city since the beginning of the century. And also, if you see here, despite the elements of discontinuity that were introduced in the city in the plan, in the Albertini plan, the Haussmannization of the center, these new interventions were generally held fast to the idea of a city composed of streets and squares. Here you see some zoom of the main ganglia, of the main spots in which the city were creating this also strange urban space, like Piazza San Babila, Piazza Missori, Piazza degli Affari, or Piazza Fiume, which now is Piazza Repubblica. So in a way, still a city made of streets and squares in which the pursuit of physical continuity was trying to be achieved. And in every time that architects were trying to propose plans that were in a way proposing a tabula rasa intervention, for example, this is the famous Dieta Levi Marescotti proposal for an area close to Corso Garibaldi. All this project remains unrealized. So there was a kind of resistance of the city to absorb tabula rasa intervention. The development of this idea of connecting and merging the new with the old, which is something that was raised in the post-war period, but was something that was embedded in the Milanese architectural culture, is closely interwoven also with the transformation of the city's major monuments from the late 19th century, taking individually, the monuments of Milan are almost all modern monuments, we could say, because they are large works built over the centuries whose story seems not to be concluded. For example, if you think about the Duomo, with its tormented history, the cathedral facade could be seen as a paradigm of the recurring Milanese condition of the monument as a work in progress, to continue into the present. But also the Ospedale Maggiore, Cagranda, the complex of Sant'Ambrogio, all open works resulting from a long and ongoing process of transformation, demolition, or expansion. Look, for example, the case of the Sforza Castle that was probably reinvented, we could say, by Luca Beltrami, who in the late 19th century, beginning of 20th century, tried to reinvent and restore the monuments following to his ideas of scientific restoration. Also, the school, the Milanese School of Restoration, it's something that has a lot to do with this idea of integrating the new and the old, of merging the new and the old. This is a quite peculiar case study. It's a project by Ambrogio Annoni, who was a pupil of Camillo Boito, who is the let's say the father of the Milanese way of restoration, of restoring monuments. And in this facade of San Pietro in Gessate, Annoni is restoring the Romanesque facade, but at the same time is allowing the Baroque portal to be left, he leaves the Baroque portal within the Romanesque facade, in a way suggesting that there is the possibility to have different time and different, let's say, codes in the same building, in a way opening the way of an idea of Roger's idea of having different times in the same building. Or we can also see some other very relevant intervention made in the 20th. This is the Muzio addition to the Brabantian cloisters of Sant'Ambrogio, in which he is trying to merge this idea of spatiality of the Renaissance cloister together with the materiality of the basilica that you see here in this photograph. And maybe you see here also further away one of the 4 buildings that we will be studying in our workshop. Or maybe we can also remind the incredible history of this building, of the family house, the family palazzo of Luigi Cacciadominioni, who was in charge of not restore, because it was bombed. This is the building on the left side that was badly damaged during the war, and it was charged to make the new palazzo. And it's quite interesting to see how this is how the idea of the new is merging with an echo of what was existing before. But also in some other a very interesting intervention by BP Pierre at the beginning of the just at the end of the war, in which they had to at the same time recover an ancient palazzo with a wonderful courtyard, and then extend it with an incredible setback system of buildings just over it. Or, for example, this other case study in which they had to, Palazzo Lurano Cernuschi, they had to restore the 18th century building and then makes the expansion and provide a new architecture that would, in a way, echo and resonate with not only with this building, but also with the history, with the medieval history of the city. So all this building, there's a an idea that, that the resulting work blurs the boundaries between the restoration and the design of the new. And using the words of Ernesto Rogers, to conserve and to construct are moments of the same act of conscience, because both are subjected to the same method. To conserve that does not make sense if it is not understood as the updating of the past, and to construct does not make sense if it is not understood as a continuation of the historical process. So these two, this additional element of the new and the old, seen as a unique act of consciousness, is something that we will find very often in our research of probing codes in Milan. The last point I would like to focus on is, okay, I'm a little bit late, is this very peculiar and intriguing and interesting relationship between the silent and the pragmatism that characterized the community of architects that were working in the city with their pragmatic and concrete approach to work, and the extraordinary endeavor emerged in the post-war period in Milan, mostly thanks to the key figure of Ernesto Rogers. This is a family photo, we could say, of not all, of course, but some of the actors of the renewal of the city. You can recognize on the left side, Joe Ponti, which is a little bit detached from the group because it was the other generation together with Muzio on the left side, and Vender, and then the other younger architects participating at this choral, I would say, work of renewal of the city. And in the context, sorry, of modern Milan, the concept of professionalism was perhaps most strongly embodied by the prevalence of an informal and tolerant sensibility. The main actors that we can see here in this photo were privileged and formed a tight and well-connected network, even if they were really seldom, not so often they were encountering sometimes at Movimento Studio di Architettura, but they were first and foremost open-minded and pragmatic. Their position was explicitly anti-academic. In their background and social status, the professional and their clients were particularly close. The cohesive of this group effectively afforded them the political power to enact a more general social program. Condition of stability provided solid ground on which the particular talents of the bourgeoisie could flourish. As the 19th century advanced, these attributes would fuse into the idea of professionalism that was could be only exercised by those in possession of a system of a particular knowledge with a position in society based on social capital. Thus, belonging to the bourgeoisie and belonging to a profession were linked by a complex relationship of reciprocity. This is a quite peculiar image of Joe Ponti, who was making cocktails to his clients. In Milan, more than elsewhere, architecture emerged as a consummate bourgeois profession. Almost all the architects relevant to the construction of the modern city belong to the local intellectual bourgeoisie, with the exception of some members of the aristocracy, and it's okay. This was a fairly close milieu. Most of all them were trained and lived in Milan or its environs, and their knowledge tended to be transferred in an unconscious way through this geographical proximity rather than through any kind of process of terrorization. For the most part, these were silent professional, as I was saying, focused on the practice and the pursuit of specific objectives. The concept of professionalism is seen as an ethical and cultural dimension linked to the intellectual activity commissioned by a client, intersected with the aspect of the Milanese bourgeois culture, which stood at a remote from the game of academy, typical of the ancient regime. The unconsciously collective way in which several generations of architects practiced their profession would leave a deep imprint on the characters of the modern city. What's more, the basic affinities between bourgeois architect and the bourgeois client, their culture, social, sometimes even family ties, meant that the architect often acted as the client's representatives in the construction of the new city, taking on the role of mediating between the client and the society. The great exception of this attitude towards the practice shared by the community of architects working in the city is the outstanding figure of Ernesto Rogers, the man that you see on the right side, the bold one. Intellectual director of Casabella, founder of BBPR, founder of Casa della Cultura. In the post-war context, Ernesto Nathan Rogers, with his ideas on ambiente, on persistenza ambientale, continuità, not only theorized the most critical issues facing architects as they came to terms with this destroyed city, but also indicated a means by which European architects could once again be authentically modern, resisting the sterile modernism of the most inveterate supporters of the international style. These themes would become central elements of the activity of generation of architects. So we could say that there's this incredible tension between the group of architects that were changing the city, which were working and silently working towards with their clients, and then a very strong theoretical endeavor taken and pushed forward by Rogers and their colleague. I would go through quickly to finish my intervention, just looking at as a small sequence of photographs that are taken around the area of Torre Velasca in the south of the cathedral, in which a constellation of modern buildings by Caccia Dominioni, Asnagavender, Muzio, and other architects that we saw in the family portrait are the most potent expression of the instances of continuity and the culture issues that I've been talking to you. The quality of this set of buildings lies precisely in the fact that they do not present themselves as the product of an external force grafted into the urban body, but are instead the most spontaneous expression of the social, economic, and cultural energies of the city at a given moment of its history. So there's a relationship between the prevailing character, architectural character of the post-war reconstruction and the distinctive qualities of bourgeois Milan. Each building of these buildings is able in its own way to engage with its situation, not in contextualist terms, but or through an attitude of subjugation, but with expressive autonomy and a particular spirit of experimentation. So in a way, the core character, it is the result of a regulatory system, it is not governed by theoretical reflection, but is a spontaneous outcome of a shared idea of the city. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Angelo. I think it was a fantastic portrait of the specificity and the character of this ground that we wanted to investigate during the course. I really convinced that this four paradigm can help a lot of the students to understand the DNA of this built environment and of the architectural diversities of architectural cultures that stratified and all the conditions that of course influenced the making of this built environment. So if you agree, I would propose to dedicate 10 minutes to the questions, even if we had the plan at the break, but I think then we can continue with the presentation of the workshop. So I would open the floor for the questions. I don't know if there are remarks, questions, curiosities about the panorama that Angelo traced. Who want to break the... Any remarks or comments?
Okay, perhaps then I have a question. I wanted to understand. Yeah, hi Angelo. Thanks for the talk. I wanted to understand actually a little bit. Look, why do you call these practices apolitical or like anti-ideological? Because I mean, I think specifically like some studies that there's almost like an impossibility to be apolitical, and we're dealing also with a group of individuals that is clearly connected to a class or bourgeoisie class, and that would be political itself. I understand it very much when you say it's adogmatic, and I do agree with what you're saying, that it is a very adogmatic position, but nonetheless, it's still political. It's putting forward a vision for society, and these individuals are, of course, related to some class. You call it yourself an intellectual elite. So there is a, if not a capital hierarchy there, or like structural hierarchy, still a symbolic one, as Bourdieu would say. There's cultural capitals as well at play. So I wanted to understand, why do you say that it is anti-ideological in this way?
I perfectly caught your point. Yeah, you're right. It's not true that the bourgeoisie ethos is apolitical, because of course it states a particular position, but it is also true that I will refer, for example, to a very important book by Norberto Bobbio that was written probably in 1955, Culture of Politics. He was asking, so there's a way to make culture without being radically informed by a political position. So I was trying to state the fact that for him, culture was something that was, in a way, set back a little bit about too much radical understanding of things. So I agree with you that, and I also agree with you that most of the, in many cases, these architects were not liberal. Some of them were, during the 30s, were taking their position. But so I'm not saying that they were all the same. But what I'm saying is that the cultural production that they were pushing forward was much less informed by political. It was much less politically driven in relation to other forms of culture that will, for example, characterize the culture life of the city from the beginning of the 60s, as we know in Italy, but also in Europe. So I'm always astonished and amazed by the fact that in a way there was the possibility to work to work together to a common achievement, which was the construction of the city, without being always ideologically pushed by some other by some motivation. So I think that in this case it's much less political and ideological than other process that we saw later or before that.
Thank you very much, Angelo, and yeah, thanks for your answer. It was quite clear. And would you say that this means also that these groups of architects and this community of practice then would be very ideologically like plural in a way? So there was like a plurality. Okay, a plurality of like ideologies in there but nonetheless they still could work together and put forward a vision for the city that was somewhat harmonic or homogenic in itself.
Yeah, I think that there was from some of them there was a total disinterest of a social let's say commitment or political commitment, but of course it was not like that. I mean, Ernesto Rojas was really taking political position. I'm not saying that he was not doing that, but some of them were really trying to avoid any kind of. Also, I think that it was you know, a way to have to work with their clients. It's for that when everything changed during the 60s, when there were no more clients asking for building, and the culture became much more influenced by let's say political position, and when the society and the economy change, especially for Milan, it's really strange that all these architects were seen as enemies, and they were seen as were completely criticized by the new generation. So it's because of that, and because of the fact that the harmony that was in a way achieved between the society and the representation of the society was completely declined.
Thank you very much for your answer, Angelo.
Thank you.
Are there other questions?
Maybe have a question as well. Thanks so much for your talk, Angelo. Very interesting. Of course, it's a fascinating topic, I think. But I wanted to ask you about what you said at the start about this coming out of research that you've done at ETH, which is where I'm doing my PhD as well. And I think in that first lecture that you gave earlier in the year, you were talking about how you kind of had to leave Milan to appreciate it from the outside, and then you kind of returned and understood what was special about it. And I was wondering if you could speak more about that sort of, you know, the tacit knowledge that means that we sometimes can't see what's special about the place that we're in until we go away. And yeah, why was it, do you think, that it was that the kind of realization came in a way from outside rather than inside?
Yeah, this is quite interesting, because actually I did not take my luggage and went away from the city of interest, because I was trying to do this traveling, but looking at things from Switzerland, and which gave me the possibility to have a detachment from the discourse, because of course these things are quite unknown for the wider European architecture culture, but they are very much studied and analyzed and explicitly let's say analyzed in the Milanese architecture culture from the pupils of those guys, but also from historians and from different kind of observers. So the detachment, it was crucial and instrumental to me to have a distance from the things that were already told about that, and also to, let's say, break some mechanical thinking about some of the also ideological thinking of some of the architects and some of the position of that architects took inside that, with a much more like, let's say, attitude towards what happened, and also a like attitude towards the fascist period, which has always been quite a difficult subject for an Italian to talk with kind of detachment. So this is quite important. And then also I think that when you see things in a lighter way coming from abroad, and it was not my case, but it was the case of talking with Adam and with Laurent, which of course they perfectly know what happened, but not so much as they were in the city. They were talking with you. You can much more strong, in a stronger way. You can make relations and see things that you see every day, but you don't really see. So that's really. It was instrumental to have this distance.
I don't know if we still have time for one more questions, and then we start to present the workshop to the SR. Are there other questions or remarks? Well, I really thank also Hamish and Eric for these remarks and comments, because touched the very crucial points. I think that the fact that Angelo never used also the term middle class, but talked about bourgeois ethos, I think it's really relevant, because in terms of stratification of the social group, you can open up a discussion about what is middle class. But then while looking, as we did in our last discussion, at the habits, or you look at this in cultural terms, so you really understand this homogeneous. So I think this is something very, very interesting. And also what Hamish was asking, I think that the fact this I don't know, Angelo, if you agree, but this anti-ideological position that in some way characterized this professional culture was also at the origins of a kind of not marginalization, stigmatization, but lack of interest in the architectural history for a long time due to this reaction in the 60s. And we can say that all these architects and this built environment was partially and relatively rediscovered also recently by architectural history. So I think it's a phenomenon that it's extremely interesting also in understanding the diverse positions that emerged in reaction to this period that was really the outcome of some forces, economic, social, and cultural, that you really can only find, I think, in the culture of the period and in the Milanese context of this period. Yeah. Coming from Turin, I can say that really what you said about the idea of company town that marked, for instance, the architecture in Turin of the peers in the same period is crucial to understand the difference.
Yeah, and I also think, no, I completely agree to what you were saying. And I would add also that when you look at things that happen in Italy from a different point of view, from a point of view of architects that have the same problem like the architects had in our post-war period, that is making the new city working with the existing circumstances and trying to engage with that. All these things that were mean, the core issues of these architects that now are the core issues of architects that are making the new European cities. So when you look at these things with their eyes, I think that the interest towards this architect is not just historical, but it's just it's like an architect that wants to clarify and to put light to some reference that he wants to use for its own purpose. So that's also quite interesting. I'm not saying that in Italy we cannot do that, but of course this detachment is helping architects from abroad to see things in a clearer way. Yes.
Maybe just one short question. This is Gennaro. Thank you so much, Angelo. But why do you think this golden era died, and why has been rediscovered 10 years ago? What did happen?
Yeah, it declined because the socio-economical condition that I tried to explain fell simultaneously. The government of the city, the economic vitality of the city began to weaken, and even if we know that the 60s were still a moment of booming, but in terms of culture production and cultural vitality, things began to weaken in relation to different political position that were taken by the pupils of Rogers, as we know the history. They were still very interested about the city, about how to relate to history, but they were, of course, criticizing any kind of. They were criticizing the very idea of professionalism that was for them a wrong role of the architect in society, that was accommodating clients without having a perspective of the new city that was to be interested in the big dimension and the problem of the periphery and the problem of and they were looking at history in a more, let's say, scientific way, in a way, with the typological discourse, but in a narrower way at the end. And then this interest in this way of making architecture appeared. Probably we were talking with Giancarlo when we were student. When we were a student, the first signs of this rediscovery of this way of doing architecture appeared, and with the book of Chino, of course, and also with some Spanish light on Snagavender, and then this rediscovery of the Swiss and the English culture that is discovering the richness that we've been producing for this idea of how to. The question is how to make a city that is contemporary, but at the same time consistent towards an existing circumstances. So that is probably the main interest. But I don't know if Giancarlo wants to add something about that.
But simply that, for example, like the question that you made, Amish, very interesting, because our personal concern is that we start to look clearly to something that was happening in Milan once we were abroad, me in Madrid and Angelo in Porto as a student. And the perspective of modernity seen from these countries that were doing and not doing a speculative process in that moment. They were really doing this process that we are studying together about tacit knowledge. And the perspective of these countries about modernity has been much more closer to the one that now we are interested in. I've been discovering Cacciadominioni from Quaders. I didn't know anything before. I knew the building, but because they were in the city landscape, but they were not in the bibliography in that moment in the school.
Okay, yeah, I have to say that even from inside, probably the booklet by Irace was the first evidence of attention for this, but it was rarely considered in the architectural histories.